As Alfred Hitchcock would say, good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, or whatever time of day it is where you are at this moment. My name is Aaron deLayed, and this is a podcast that is largely an experiment. And you probably are going, well, yeah, we've been listening to all the podcasts you've produced on this Create at Morgan idea. They've all been great experiments. But this is an experiment because it is just me talking to you about a thing I'm doing, which is writing, which is why this podcast is called a deLayed Writer Podcast. There are no co-hosts. There are no people in the wings waiting to jump in and help me out get through the content. It's just me and you talking about the greatest human achievement in the history of the world, writing, and all that is entailed. I'm going to talk you through a lot of things, and I'm going to introduce you to my book that I'm writing and that I'm rewriting and getting ready for publishing, and in a way that's not like totally like all that like knowledgeable, because this is my first go through. This is my first time ever doing this, of ever finishing a story, having it come back from an editor, and doing all the things. So I'm hopeful that you'll join me on this journey, if for nothing else than to enjoy my pain of being a writer and having to rewrite and rethink and redo. I'm also going to talk about, I'm taking a class through our local community college called Creative Writing 2, and I've been writing and reading and things there. So I'm going to share some of my experiences there as a writer and a reader. And maybe you might be interested in just kind of joining me along on my journey as we step in to the story of my life and the journey into novel writing and publishing and becoming the next, I don't know who I'll be. I might just be Aaron deLayed. So stick around, hold on, strap in, and get ready for a deLayed Writer Podcast. Welcome to the podcast. Again, my name's Aaron, and I'm a writer. And it's weird to say that. I'm sure you're like, okay, dude, yeah, you are. Congratulations. But for the longest time, I never really was able to say that with much confidence. And I've been writing since I was in middle school. So I'm 39 into 40 now. I'm on my days away from my 40th. And I never really felt like I was a great or even a good writer. I knew that I had skills, and I knew that my teachers loved what I wrote, and I loved what I wrote, and I thought it was the most amazing thing I'd ever done. But usually what would happen is I would get it back, and I would sit down with it, and I would try and finish it, or I would try and complete the short story or the novel or whatever it was that I was writing, and I never really was able to get there. I was never able to really reach that point of saying, yep, I stuck the landing, I got the ball through the uprights, the shot on goal on the ice is in, goal, that never really happened for me throughout my formative middle school, high school, college, and then the years in between when I was not, I went for a year to college, and then I was like, I'm going to take a year off, and that turned into 14 years, and then I came back to school in 2014, got my degree 4 years later in English and secondary ed teaching, got my teaching license, and now I teach language arts, and I've been doing it for 4 years here in Morgan County, and it'll be my 5th year starting next year. So all through that time, I was trying to write. I was trying to finish short stories. I would start something, and it wouldn't really ever finish. And it was so hard to convince myself that I was a writer. Now, if you had been sitting with me as an advisor or a mentor or even as a writer, kind of fellow writer giving me advice or walking me through things, you would probably have said, dude, you are a writer. Like, that's a thing that you are, and you need to be okay with that. I don't think I ever got to that point until I self-published a short story online. And that moment was very interesting because as I wrote this short story, the characters took over. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this as a writer. or as like an amateur writer or a novice writer or any kind of writer, or even just a reader, you've seen it happen as you're reading. When you're writing a story, you have to keep in mind your characters, your setting, everything, the world that you're building, right? If it's a world of fantasy, if it's a world of real, if it's a world of science fiction, if it's a world of steampunk, if it's a world of horror, whatever that world that you're building, you have to be aware of all the pieces and the parts that are moving at the same time so that you can keep up with it. There's no you can't sleep on it or let it kind of fade away. You have to be monitoring all those pieces as you're writing and composing and creating dialogue and creating plot and action. You can't just not be thinking about it. And so as I was writing this short story, there was a moment where the characters that I had constructed and the story that I was writing and the plot that I was creating and crafting, the characters suddenly turned to me metaphorically, or in my head turned to me and said, okay, we'll take it from here. Now, obviously, they didn't write themselves, clearly, but they began to act in a way that was specifically them and less of me. So the characters' actions were dictated by the rules that I had given them in the early parts of the story. And those rules that I gave them, each character had their own set of kind of personality, their speech type, their way that they held themselves, the way that they acted, etc. That all began to actually have consequences, and characters began to actually have to do things that I would not have had them do normally, because now suddenly they have to do it because they are demanding it from me. As I'm writing this, I'm going, well, oh boy, this character this character won't need this. They're telling me that this needs to happen. And it's as a new writer, as a amateur, a novice, I'm not sure what my label would be. It was really unnerving for that to happen. And it's happened since, but it was the first time where a character in a story really began to tell its own tale and to take control. And it was writing the story. It was no longer me putting in my ideas and, oh, I'm going to try this. It was, well, now I've created the foundations of this story with the characters and the setting in the first couple of pages. Now this has to go this way. And it wasn't some of the stuff that happened in that story, like the language and the way that people were talked to and things and the way they interacted, was not what I intended. My parents read the story and they're like, this is nothing you've ever written before. And I said, yeah, it's a little weird and a little uncomfortable because it was outside of my comfort zone, but I had to, as a writer, go, look, the characters and the plot needs to do this. I don't particularly feel comfortable taking it in this direction, but if I'm going to get better as a writer, if I'm going to get better as a storyteller, if I'm going to get better as a composer of worlds and creator of stories, I can't just step away from that. I have to step into that breach. I have to step into that risk. I have to step into that moment and say, let's see if this works. And looking at the final draft that eventually made its way online and all that, I think it works. It is unlike anything I've ever written in my life, and I think it probably will continue to be that way for quite some time. So as a writer, that was an interesting moment, and it made me realize that, you know what, I can finish. Like, this was my first short story that I had finished, completed, signed, sealed, delivered. I obviously self-published it, put it online for 99 cents, like whatever, there it is. But I realized, I stepped back and I went, oh boy, I actually can finish something. I can finish a story. And so I had a lot of different pieces of different novels that I was writing on. I said, okay, I gotta cut the chaff. I gotta thin the herd. And I need to focus on at least the stories that I have that are larger than 5,000 words. And so at that point, I had 3 novels that I was intermittently playing with and writing that were upwards of 30,000 words at that point. And so I decided, okay, I need to finish one of these. And so I decided to do that. But before that, I had always written stuff for school, for high school, and things that, you look back on and you go, oh man, this is bad. But at the time, that's what I knew. And knowing what I knew how to write in 2001 versus knowing what I now knew how to write in 2018 or 2017, that was a huge amount of time for a writer. we take a lot from what we read. We take a lot from what we see. We take a lot from what we listen to. We take a lot from what we learn as writers in workshops, in classes, or with other writers. And so that span of time was like gold, because I now look at the writing that I'm doing now, and it is like finely, created chocolate from the far reaches of the French Resistance in the hills of wherever, because it's so incredibly amazing comparatively to my 2001 high school writing self, and even my 2005 or 2010. You look at that and I go, baby, okay, all right. I had a lot of work to do, and I still have a lot of work to do, because I'm not suggesting that I'm Stephen King by any stretch of any imagination, but it's been really nice to go, I can write, and I am a writer. Part of my process in doing that is I needed to finish a story. So I had 3 stories. One's a steampunk, one's a fantasy, and one's a realistic fiction. 3 very different stories with 3 very different characters and plots and conflicts and settings and everything else. And I had to sit down and go, okay, which is the one that has the best chance of getting knocked out and done and able to be just at least reach an endpoint. The story will come to the last chapter and it'll be like, I got it. That was the realistic fiction story, and it's called Seven Falls. And I will talk more in detail about it in future episodes, because I'll talk about the editing process with each chapter and what it's been like and how characters have had to change and how my writing had to change. I'll compare, and it'll be very. You may find it interesting, you may find it boring, I'm not sure which, but I'm going to basically say, okay, here's how I did this, and here's what I had to do, because what I was doing was this, and what I needed to do is that. As a writer, a lot of what we have to be told sometimes is, don't do this, do this, and be shown how that works, or walked through how that works, and then we get our own writer's voice in the mix, and we start actually going, oh, okay, yeah, I need to shift that. I need to shift that perspective, or I need to shift that dialogue, or I need to shift the action, or I need to shift the storytelling, or I need to shift the setting. Like, there's so much involved in writing, which is the beauty of it, because there's so many different, again, moving pieces that you kind of have to make sure you have your hands on as you write your story, your short stories, your poetry, your long stories, your novels, things like that. You have to have your hands at least touching it every so often, so that you know, okay, that's stable. Okay, that I'm going to have to come back to. I'm going to put a sticky note on that one, and I'll circle back to it in like a week, and then I'll get back to it and be like, okay, cool, sticky note. I got to work on this part. That's in my chaotic brain of writer. That's what I have to do. So I wrote this story for about 3 years, and it came to a point, I want to say like November, December of last year. And the story, it was moving. Like, suddenly things were happening, and plot was moving, and characters were changing, and character arcs and plot arcs were firing off like fireworks and landing where they needed to land. And it came to a point like one day where it was just like, and I finished the chapter that I written, and I went, it's done. I just finished a novel. I just wrote a 38, I think at that point it was like a 37,000 word novel. It had a beginning, it had a middle, it had an end. It was very rough. It was very rough. Still is very rough. And I decided, okay, well, now I have to figure out how to do this, because now I have it, but do I just like put it up and sell it for 99 cents? Or do I do what I need to do and follow the process of getting an editor and getting people to look through my story and evaluate it and take an outsider's perspective and give me honest feedback? What a lot of writers sometimes do, at least independent writers will do, and this is what I was tempted to do because I've seen it done, is, I'll do my own editing, I'll do my own revising, and then I'll like edit it into a electronic version and put it up on Amazon, sell it for like $10, and that'll be my thing. I'll be published. However, I sat on it for a couple of days and I was like, you know what? I think I need to get this thing professionally edited, because I'm 39 years old and I'm a language arts teacher by trade and by degree. And I know enough to be dangerous, but I don't know enough to take apart my own work. Like, I could probably sit down with it, print it out, and spend several days just circling, highlighting, crossing out and all that. But I'm going to be afraid to attack my own story. They call it kill your darlings. is what a lot of people will say with writers. Is you need to kill your darlings. You need to get rid of the purple prose, if you will, because there's stuff in there that we just write because it sounds so good. No, we don't want that character to die, or we don't want that character to have this happen to them, and so we struggle as writers, and so we need someone else to go, nope, that's got to change. Here's the here's the kitchen knife. I need you to go cut that out of the script. I need you to reorganize it, rework it. Get the rubber cement and copy and paste it and move it around a little bit and put some new spins on it. And you have to just go, okay. So I got myself an editor. I sent it off to her. She's a paid editor. Obviously, you want that. And I waited. I was so terrified. I was so nervous, and I waited through Christmas, and she had a whole bunch of things happening with her, and she got back to me, and she said, okay, here is your manuscript with comments, and here is your editor's kind of like notes in paragraph form of the stuff that I think you need to work on. I got that back, and I looked, and I read through all the comments that she wrote on all the pages, and I looked through the editor's response thing, and I was just like, oh no, I'm terrible. I'm the worst writer ever there was. I didn't do it right. It's a terrible story. That was not the truth, because she was like, this is a great story. You've got some really good stuff here. Like, we just need to work on some things. But what I saw was, this needs to change. This got to change. This has got to change. This got to change. She was plenty complimentary to in fairness to my editor. She's been absolutely delightful in the process. But as a writer, my first reaction for the first time getting an editor's information back was like, oh man, I suck. Oh, I suck. Oh, how much I suck. I'm a terrible person. I'm a terrible writer. I can't do anything right. So I had to put some time away from it. And I also got busy with life and teaching, and I was doing part-time gigs, doing GED programs and stuff like that. And so I finally sat down. I said, okay, I got to start rewriting this. So I said, okay, we got to meet online. We got to do a video session, and we got to talk through this because I got to start working. So I started rewriting, and it was hard as an overall review. And I'll talk individually about each chapter, but rewriting is the hardest thing I've done so far, because the notes that she gave and the comments that she gave and the ideas that she had and the suggestions and things, they were valid. There's no way to dance around that. They were legit. That was the thing. I had to make the changes. The story needed an upgrade. The story needed polishing. The story needed more meat. It needed strengthening. It needed better pieces to it, and it had good stuff, but it was like a Lego thing. You had to take some things apart and put in some new fresh Legos and construct something different and add it and keep kind of pulling stuff out. This isn't a Jenga situation. This is just you're pulling pieces out and putting other pieces in and making it an even better creation. So the revising process so far, I've gotten up to chapter 5 out of 22 chapters, and it has significantly changed the book and the plot and the characters, but in such better ways that I am far happier with the process that I'm in. Mind you, rewriting is not like I thought of rewriting as just like change a few things each chapter. The illusion there for certain stories that are still needing a lot of development and kind of some cleaning up is, no, rewriting is you're going to have to go chapter by chapter and like reorient, refix, remodel, basically take a wrecking ball to some stuff, and it has just got to go and never see the light of day again. And maybe it'll come back in some variation in another one of your stories, but some things have just got to be like lifted up and thrown to the moon or thrown into the sun, and that's just how it has to go sometimes. Does it suck? Yes, as a writer, it sucks. It's hard. It's a challenge to let go of some of these things, because some of this stuff I enjoyed writing and I love reading it. I'm just like, yeah, my editor's right. It's got to go. So, to writers out there who are amateur, novice, or whatever, if you're listening, your editor, if they're paid well, and if they have a good resume and good like results that you can see, they're worth your time and your money, because they will definitely help you make your story better. And I cannot be thankful enough to have an editor that I have. So that's kind of where it's headed. That story is, fingers crossed, knock on wood and all those other things, will be finished with editing by June 3rd. At that point, the rewrites will be completed, and will now begin the process of figuring out how to publish this thing. That's a whole other process that I will probably chronicle on my podcast as I stumble through that process and figure out, okay, who do I talk to? Who do I trust? And how much and what's it going to cost me? And how's it going to get out there? And is there an audience for this thing? And, is the time right for this kind of a book? And all of that conversation. On top of that, the book is going to be a part of a series, because the stories that were told in the book that I've finished, there are so many more stories to tell in the town of Seven Falls that there's at least one, possibly two more. And if we really dig hard with our tools and jackhammers and stuff, we might be able to find content for a third book. So excitement and thrill rides a minute are happening in my head with this story. But I have to also take time to sit down and just kind of step away from it. So there's balance. And I'll talk a lot about that as we explore future chapters. So that's my writing history. That's where I've been. That's where I'm going. I want to be very clear that I am not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, you could find guys like Dean Koontz, Stephen King, J.K. Rowling. You could find all the writers in the world who know more and more about this thing and could tell you all the things. There are writing books out there galore from celebrated authors and celebrated professors. You should probably read those and examine them and internalize them. I will talk about those books here in future episodes, because I'm reading through some of them, and I have used some of them in my creative writing classes, and it's been really helpful because I'm still learning. I'm always going to be learning, and as a writer, we have to keep learning. We can't give up. We have to keep pushing ourselves to be even better than we were the day before, because there's a lot of stories in this world to be told, and we get the opportunity to tell as many as we can for as long as we get to take breath and put hands on keyboard and put pens to paper. That's the brilliance of writing. That's the power of authorship. That's the power of stories. This world is hungry for them. Through movies, through books, through TVs. Like, we watch stories because they bring us joy. They put us in the moment, and there is power in all that. So hear me loud and clear. If you're out there and you're like, am I a writer? You are a writer. What kind of writer? I don't know. But that's up to you to discover, and for you to explore, and for you to take risks in figuring out what your capability is and how do you learn to improve that and get better and strengthen yourself and continue to expand your skill set. And I'll be right here with you every week here on this podcast. It's going to be an adventure unlike anything you've ever heard of before. It's not even close to the Bilbo at the end of the first Hobbit movie where he's going on an adventure. No, we're going on a journey, and it is a lifelong journey of writers, readers, and creators. My name is Aaron. This has been a delayed writer podcast. If you're interested in the content, in the stories, and the things, I have a list of my projects on aarondelay.com/writer. I probably should double check that before I say that, don't you think? Would that be a good idea? Because if I give you the wrong URL, you're going to be really upset. Yeah, so it's aarondelay.com/writer. And I list my projects. I long ago, I had Seven Falls and a bunch of the other novels online through a sharing writing site. I've taken them down because I read and on advice through Google that if you're trying to shop your novel around and, for publishing, they're going to ask you, well, is this available anywhere else? And if it's been recently available on like a Wattpad or a Tableau or various other sites that offer the ability for you to share your story before it's published, there's a very good chance that your publishing company that you're trying to court will say, they can just get it online there. They don't have to pay any money for it, and why would we enter into a deal with you? So I've removed all of it off the internets. I will read some stuff to you, obviously, in future episodes, and I'll share some stuff with you because that's important. You should hear some stuff, but I also am not going to totally read it right for you because I want there to be some mystery. I want there to be some excitement when eventually this novel hits. And you want to go, I want to read this because the way he's talked about the scenes he's read or the characters he's described, oh my gosh, this is exciting. So that's my hope and my dreams in the future. So until then, you can find my production company, which I am the sponsor for at my high school here in Fort Morgan, Colorado, at createatmorgan.org. Again, that's create@morgan.org. You can find me on Twitter at @deLayedWriter is where my writing account is, and there's links on Create at Morgan to all our other podcasts that we host through this group, and you can find links to my teacher Twitter account and Instagram things and things like that there. And hopefully you'll find something that you like in this podcast or in other podcasts. We have a nerd podcast, we have a computer gaming podcast. Lots of cool stuff still to come this year and into next school year as well. It's been a pleasure venting at you, talking to you. Hopefully you've gotten a kick out of what I've got to say. Hopefully something resonated. And if you're still in that seat of going, I'm not a writer, Aaron, don't tell me what to do. I'm here to tell you what to do. You're a writer. Get writing. Figure out what kind of a writer you are. What are your strengths? What are the things you need to work on? And let's get writing. Writing is the greatest gift humanity has given us since the beginning of time. And we should never, ever stop writing. Pick up that pencil, pick up that keyboard. Let's get to work. I'll see you on the next one.
I can see what we are, don't know where we belong. Wanna know what you're thinking, wanna know if something's missing. Started stories before, but they ended up short. Get me up to higher places, want you to fill my pages. Is this for real or is it just a fantasy? Are we from now or is it really meant to be? Are you still in my arms when we've read out all the parts of this story? Far past the epilogue, will I still be in your heart when this story? Are you still in my arms when we've read out all the parts of this story? Far past the epilogue, will I still be in your heart in this story?